New Minnesota Vikings general manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has come in and has just already made his mark on the Vikings. And you would think that a first-time general manager taking over a team that was on the verge of making the playoffs last year, maybe with some new leadership, they can push it and they can win the division, etc. Just sort of ease into the job, because as a new GM, if you don't make that many changes on the rooster, you always have that scholarship card in your back pocket. It's like, oh, yeah, I haven't built my roster yet. We're just trying to see if we could make it work with the other guys, right? He could have done that. But, I mean, Kwesi is cleaning house. He's getting rid of the Spielman-Zimmer guys, him and Kevin O'Connell making some moves, and some of them are controversial, but you cannot deny that Kwesi's definitely got some huevos, right? First-time general manager, doesn't come from a football or scouting background, comes from an analytics background, is just like, F you. This is how we're doing it, and I respect it. We'll see how it works out, but I do love the cojones to go after it, man. So, quick timeline. Some of the major moves and transactions that have happened under Kwesi's watch. This is probably not even all of them, but we tried to back of the envelope. There we go. So February 11th, named Kevin O'Connell head coach. Now, this does make sense. The league is trending towards young and offensive-minded. Kevin O'Connell from the Sean McVay tree saw how it operated with Zach Taylor with the Bengals, as well as the 12-year-old boy. Spent a year on McVay's staff. Doesn't matter. As non-play calling OC, same role that Kevin O'Connell had last 2 seasons. Whatever. Also, let's remember that Kwesi and the flirtation with Jim Harbaugh, where I was a fan of it at the time. In retrospect, I like Kevin O'Connell way better. But, of course, hindsight is 2020. It would have been fun because he would have come into Manny's. He would have ordered a steak. He would have gotten a glass of milk with it. And it was who's got it better than us? Nobody. But the fact that Kwesi, given their ties in San Francisco and whatnot, but he had the foresight, he had the open-mindedness to at least take that interview where Harbaugh flew in, thought it was a job offer, but it was like, no, this is an interview, bro. And then they went with Kevin O'Connell, and then Harbaugh signed like a lifetime deal with Michigan. Doesn't matter. But March 4th, signed the legend T.Y. McGill. Now, to a degree, this is tongue-in-cheek, but also you're finding a guy who probably would have made the rooster if he didn't end up on IR. Showed up in preseason, had himself a really good training camp, a guy who's bounced around from 9 different teams over 13 transactions over 8 seasons, and you get something out of him. That has value. That has value on the bottom of the roster and the practice squad. Re-signed Kirk Cousins, freed up some cap space. Now, he had to have known that extending Kirk Cousins, again, wouldn't have been the most popular move, but he understands, and Kevin O'Connell understands as well, that's the only move they could have made, because drafting a quarterback would have been a crapshoot. Quarterback on the roster, maybe not so much. We know that now. And Cousins was the smart, safe move. It opened up some cap space. And again, we've said, I mean, GMs and head coaches get fired after 2 years all the time, maybe even 1. And Cousins is under contract through 2023, so they are hitching their wagons, their professional livelihoods, and their reputations to Kirk Cousins. I mean, that if you want to talk about having some skin in the game, I mean, that's certainly it. March 10th, cut Michael Pierce. So, new GMs coming in, it's their prerogative. They can generally get rid of the previous GM's draft picks as well as their high-priced free agents, and Michael Pierce was the latter, right? And to a degree, a little bit unpopular, but Michael Pierce, I mean, he's a talented guy, just couldn't stay healthy, as well as switching to the 3-4. I think he would have been perfectly fine as that nose tackle. He played well in it his first time in Baltimore. Now he's back there. But then March 12th, signed linebacker Jordan Hicks. Again, underrated, cheap deal, veteran starter, perfect for the scheme, underrated signing. Signed up nose tackle Harrison Phillips. Younger version of Michael Pierce, better version than Michael Pierce because the best ability is availability, as well as, well, even though Phillips was dinged up in Buffalo. Doesn't matter. But Phillips has come in. He's embraced the role. He had a really fantastic in training camp, and also is on even on a cheaper deal. So that makes a lot of sense. March 17th, restructured Harrison Smith, and also March 18th and 22nd, they restructured Adam Thielen and Danielle Hunter's contracts respectively. So with Harrison and Thielen, They have both just signed extensions in 2021 under Spielman, but generally you restructure a player that you see as part of your team, because you don't want to restructure and kick some guaranteed dead cap money to future seasons for a guy who's not going to be here. But Harrison taking care of him, Thielen taking care of him. Team, they're gonna say team guys, but then they get their salary up front. Love it, man. But the actual restructure was with Danielle Hunter. Well, even though Thielen got a little bit more, but the actual restructure was with Danielle Hunter. The big question was what was going to happen, because they had to make a decision on his contract. They had that $20 million balloon roster payment due as he was coming back from the torn pec muscle. But Kwesi, again, he committed to Danielle this 4 days after signing Zadarius Smith, who formerly of the Greasy Grimy Green Bay Packers had some health concerns. Initially signed with the Ravens, then they tore up that contract, and then Zadarius came here, and he signed him to a large contract on paper, but in reality, it was a minimal 1-year deal, really protecting the team. A smart move there. But pairing him up with Danielle Hunter for this season, and maybe even long term, again, if they stay healthy, they're going to be one of the best duos in the league. Plus, Danielle, I understand from Danielle's perspective, it would have been tough to really leverage negotiations, but Kwesi made Danielle, who at 27 is still one of the young superstars in this league, getting some health luck. It made him feel wanted and appreciated, and that's what you need. That is part of the culture that Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell are building, and it just does seem like they're having more fun. It does seem like players are more tuned in and dialed in, and I think that will carry over to success in the regular season and the playoffs. And then re-sign quarterback Patrick Peterson, even though Patrick Peterson is not that first ballot Hall of Fame man-to-man, belt-buckle to belt-buckle cornerback one versus wide receiver one guy that he was for a decade in Arizona. He can still play, as he saw last year. And plus, as the Vikings are moving more to a zone defense versus man-to-man, Peterson can use his instincts, watching the quarterback as opposed to turning his back. It's a phenomenal spot. Plus, his mentorship, his leadership in that secondary is unrivaled. The draft, so you traded down with the Lions and the Packers. Now, that's a no-no. Trading in division and potentially enriching your divisional rivals, especially. So, we live in a fantasy football world, right? And it's more apparent when a wide receiver, running back, quarterback, tight end is doing well versus a guard or a nose tackle, right? And the spectrum of Kwesi potentially being embarrassed as he traded down with the Lions from 12 to 32. They came up for Jamison Williams, who is out right now with the torn ACL. But yeah, I think that he has an opportunity to be a star in this league. And then you trade down again in the second round from 34 for 2 second-round picks with the Packers. They move up and take physical freak Christian Watson, who does have some potential as well. I mean, with the visibility of the wide receiver position, this could be a move that haunts the Vikings for years. Like if Williams turns into a Pro Bowler, same thing with Christian Watson. I mean, this will always be thrown in the Vikings and Kwesi's face. But even though he knows that, well, maybe he doesn't care, but which I kind of respect too. But even though he knows that, he was going to take that value, because most of the trade charts, they agree that Kwesi won the Detroit trade. Kwesi definitely won the Packers trade. So the fact that he has the courage and guts to do that, even though it could blow up in his face, again, got to respect that. Then the draft, even though Lewis Cine, he's not starting on paper, he's going to get his snaps. He's going to be great on special teams as well. But Cine, Booth, Ingram, Evans, Asamoah, Chandler, Usazi as well. I mean, that at minimum, that's 5, maybe 6 starters on this team. Not right away, but future, within 2-3 years. Maybe Usazi even gets in as a 5-tech, so that could be 7. That's damn good draft. Plus, sort of having the guts to pass up on Kyle Hamilton and still take a safety at 32 and Lewis Cine. Even though I prefer Cine at 32 versus Hamilton at 12, but that's a discussion for another day. And then August 20th. So you kept UDFA punter Ryan Wright. You cut Jordan Berry. So you're going with the youth movement, even though the veteran would have been understandable. He was a solid holder as well. He was perfectly fine and steady last year, but you went with Ryan Wright, who doesn't look like a punter, but he's got that leg. He's got that touch. He's got a little mojo, man. You love it. August 22nd, traded for Niners quarterback Nick Mullins. Now, he could have doubled down on his ego, where this offseason, the Vikings rolled to Kellen Mond, a third-round pick, number 66 overall from the Spielman regime last year. And also they re-signed Sean Mannion, which I don't know. But Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell said, hey, we can work with these guys. We're going to pass up on bringing in other quarterbacks in free agency. We're going to pass up on all the quarterbacks in the draft because they could have drafted any quarterback at any particular junction of the draft. They had opportunity at the entire class, and they passed because they thought Kellen Mond, Manning could do it. But they didn't do it in training camp. They didn't do it in preseason. And Kwesi, again, we all have egos, and especially NFL executives, right? And Kwesi could have doubled and tripled down. It's like, oh no, we made a decision. That's final, right? So we're not changing course. We're rolling with Kellen Mond and Sean Mannion. But no, Kevin O'Connell, Sean Mannion, they traded for Nick Mullins. They admitted, like, hey, we made a mistake. We got it wrong. Kellen Mond's not ready to be QB2. Sean Mannion's not ready to be QB47. So they traded for Nick Mullins, got it done. August 30th, they traded for Ross Blacklock, who Kwesi saw as massive value, former second-round pick, number 40 overall, coming out of TCU. Didn't get it done with the Texans, but could add a lot of value to the Vikings defensive line. And then the big one. So, they waived Kellen Mond, waived Sean Mannion, waived ISM. Fifth-round pick last year from the Spielman regime. He looked primed to be wide receiver 4. Armand for Watts, on paper, the entire preseason and offseason was in at that 5-tech spot. They waived both of them. They both go to the Bears. And again, that's another thing of Kwesi knew the waiver order. Like, he knew that the Bears were up there at 7 and needed help at wide receiver and defensive line, and still was like, I don't care. I don't care. We're going to get it done, even though they're going to stay in division all likelihood. And then Wyatt Davis, another third-round pick. Again, wasn't his draft picks, but the fact that you let go 3 third-round picks after one season, man, that does take... That does take some intestinal fortitude. And then August 30th, you trade for Eagles' former first-round pick, wide receiver Jalen Reagor. Now, all of the narratives, it was like, hey, Jalen was taken 1 pick ahead of Justin Jefferson, and now they're going to be on the same team. But they got it done. They get it done. Where, I mean, the Eagles... Of course, Eagles fans are like, poo-poo, boo, he's a bust, whatever. But, again, Kwesi got him for not a lot. Now, there's a lot of people, making these jokes and, these false comparisons. And I do like Dov Kleeman, NFL reporter, NFL, blah, blah, blah. And this isn't just picking on him, but a lot of people have made this false comparison. The Cowboys traded Pro Bowl wide receiver Mark Cooper for a 5th-round pick. The Eagles traded first-round bust wide receiver Jalen Reagor for a conditional 4th-round pick and a 7th-round pick. And now it's like, oh, one of these things is not like the other. Well, there's a couple of things. Well, yeah, I mean, these trades don't make sense in a vacuum, but football is not played in a vacuum because that would really suck. Nailed it. Because the Cowboys were dumping Amari Cooper's salary, and Amari Cooper was also 5 years older than Jalen Reagor. So, the fact that, I mean, the Cowboys were able to get anything out of him is a miracle. And then, chalk went up to the Browns. And the Eagles, getting a 4th and a 7th for a guy who was a first-round pick 2 years ago. How come Howie's not getting busted up for that? Instead of this whole false comparison is like, oh, well, I mean, of course, Amari Cooper was just blah, blah, blah. Cowboys are stupid. And then Howie almost got that for Jalen. Well, you got more than that. Now, no. How's Jay Jaw working out, Eagles fans? Just ridiculous, man. But, Kwesi was able to get that done for a 4th and conditional, for a 7th and conditional 4th that could turn to a 5th, whatever. And then his guy, right guard Jesse Davis, traded to the Steelers after Ed Ingram, his draft pick, got it done. And remember, I mean, the Vikings gave Jesse Davis a decent chunk of change this offseason. A 1-year, $3 million deal. Half of it was in signing bonus. That's going to be dead against the cap this year and next year. But, I mean, Kwesi, again, this comes down to ego or lack of it. He could have dug in his heels like, hey, this is a free agent guy that I signed. He's going to stay here. He's making that money, and he's going to be fine, right? He's going to back things up. But he saw a way to dump some salary as well as recoup some late-round draft capital, and he did it. Even though it could have been said, Kwesi signed another bust and gave him $1.5 million dead against the cap over the next 2 years. No. He's like, no, I'm going to do whatever I can to improve this team at every juncture. I don't care if it makes me look bad. I don't care if it's not soothing my ego. I don't care if people are going to think it's nuts. So I like it. I like it, man. And hopefully this translates to on-the-field success. But, I mean, having a GM who's not afraid, I mean, that's what it takes. And I do think that him and Kevin O'Connell are forming a nice tandem right now. And even though some of these moves may be controversial, we've even come out and said some of them, well, the Lions trade at the time, I kind of booed, mainly because I just wanted to do a video about the draft pick at 12 versus dropping down to 32, or the waiving of Armand for Watts, or the waiving of ISM, all of that stuff. But in Kwesi we trust. Until we have a losing season, then fire everyone. But that's it. That's recapping all of Kwesi's major moves in his first year as Minnesota Vikings general manager. Let us know your thoughts and our thoughts in the comment section below. Subscribe for daily Vikings takes. Want to support the work? Put a little something in the Venmo. But until next time, Skull Production Value.